Let me point out two things on that topic here. The White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki recently confirming that the president will nominate a black woman. But then also, too, as many remember, the president promised Representative Clyburn in South Carolina that he would appoint a black woman to the Supreme Court. Many attribute Clyburn as the reason why Biden is in the White House. Biden would have to make good on his promise, many critics say. But what does that say if this is handled from a gender and a background perspective?
Oh, it's wrong. Yes, he's going to do it. He's going to nominate a black woman. He's promised to do it. He's a man of his word. He's an honorable person. He's just wrong to have announced that there are racial and gender exclusions. What if he were to say, or what if a president were to say 100 years ago, don't worry about me, I'm going to appoint a white person to the Supreme Court. You don't have to worry about me. Or I'm appointing a Christian to the Supreme Court. Don't worry about me. No atheists need apply. That would be unconstitutional. And I think the spirit of the Constitution, and I think President Biden, who I voted for and who I've known for 40 years, should know better. Look, I've also known Steve Breyer for almost 60 years. We clerked for the same justice. We were on the faculty together for 25 years. I helped him get his nomination to the Supreme Court. I pushed very hard with President Clinton to nominate him to the Supreme Court back in the 1990s. And I'm proud of the role he's played. He's been a great justice because he hasn't been a knee-jerk liberal. He's been a pragmatist, somebody who generally votes on the liberal side,
sure,
but, for example, in criminal justice matters, is more likely to vote on the conservative side, except for the death penalty. Yeah. So I hope he's replaced by somebody who is pragmatic, who is centrist, who is less than radical on either side. I think the same when the Republicans get to make nominations. They should nominate centrists, not radicals, from the radical fringe of their party.
A couple of things to point out. So Justice Stephen Breyer, you're talking about, served 27 years. He's 83 years old. He's going to make his announcement today about retiring. Doesn't seem to be a big issue as the Democrats getting their confirmation through 50-50. They've got the tiebreaker with Kamala Harris. Talking about Kamala Harris, I know your thoughts on this, but I've got to point this out. There is speculation that there could be a nomination of Vice President Kamala Harris to the Supreme Court. The White House was asked about it. Here's their response.
Is there any scenario in which the president would select his Vice President Kamala Harris for the Supreme Court?
Again, I'm not going to speak to any considerations, preparations, lists, and as we've stated earlier, and you heard the president say, there's a long history of Supreme Court justices determining when they may retire, if they retire, and announcing that. And we're going to, that remains the case today.
Look, it's not going to happen. He's not going to nominate Kamala Harris because she wouldn't get a single Republican vote. So it would be 50-50. And if it's 50-50, does she get to confirm herself? Obviously not. Remember how many people on the left said the president couldn't pardon himself. I assure you that these folks, the Larry Tribes of the world, will come up with a constitutional rationale that says, no, a president can't pardon himself, but a vice president can confirm herself. This president is not going to open up that can of worms. So he's not going to nominate Kamala Harris. She's not qualified to be on the Supreme Court by her background and history. And if I were a Republican, or a Democrat, I would not vote to confirm that nomination. I also don't think that Chuck Schumer should have said that we're going to confirm the nomination. That's not his job. His job is to have open hearings with an open mind and decide whether or not to confirm based on the merits. He shouldn't state in advance that he's going to confirm whoever the president nominates. That politicizes the Supreme Court to a degree that the framers never intended it to be politicized.
No shot. Kamala Harris from Professor Dershowitz.
No shot.
All right.